Please join me in welcoming Robert and all the presidents to the Strand.
Robert, would you like to start? That's a good question. I don't really have an answer for that. Robert said he was going to be arriving at 7, so he's running a little late. So, do you want me to use this? Can you hear me back there? We can pretty much hear you. Can I use the mic? We can hear you. I don't know how to turn it on. We're going to take it apart. Okay. I got it.
Can you? That's working. Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for coming to this. This is the official debut for my new book, All the Presidents, it's basically it is what it is. It's like it's All the Presidents. My wife Kathy came up with the title. I was struggling with the title. It's like, well, these are portraits of all 44. There's actually 45, but one guy was president twice. Grover Cleveland, yeah, he was president twice. So there's actually 44. So my original thought for the title was, so we had this title, and I thought, like, well, how about we call it From the First to the Worst as a subtitle. And Kathy said, you don't really want to like cast like a negative spin on things, like, on the cover at least, It's like, let people figure it out, themselves when they look through all the portraits and whatnot. So, so what I did with this book, as you'll see hopefully, is I tried to be as respectful as possible with everybody, including, some of the more recent ones that, people have some negative feelings about perhaps, including Richard Nixon, but it's like, it's like, Richard Nixon is one of these guys that's like, Robert is here. So, I'm going to hold that thought, and we'll continue.
I'm from upstate.
Oh, my God.
2 hours. Very sorry, everyone.
Glad to see you.
Should I get up there? I'm interrupting.
We only just started. We didn't start.
For a treat.
There's an elevator there. Thank you for coming. Can I give you a hug?
Of course.
All right. Now, I only want to talk about you, actually. Let me turn this on for
Thank
you.
you. Oh, sorry.
Okay, you're good.
So many funny things happen on the way to the.
Is that on? I turned it off. Sorry about that. Okay. It's got a red light on it, though.
It even stopped raining.
How's this? Is this on now?
No.
Okay. How's this? Is this on?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, there we go. It did stop raining.
Check 1, 2. My uncle invented that as the first test for my.
Thank
Loved
you.
your book.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this with me. It's an honor. We've done a couple other talks together. And it's always, you were like my second choice for this. And my first choice was actually Kurt Anderson, who wrote the foreword, but he had to be out of town.
I love him.
I secretly thought, like, that's great, because you were actually my first choice, but I had to, defer to him originally.
But you know what I just discovered today, in looking over it again? You dedicated it to Nick Meglin,
Yeah.
who I loved.
I didn't know you knew him.
I did, and he dedicated one of the Mad books to me.
Really? Which one?
50s Mad?
Okay.
50s.
Yeah. Well, because you used Mad on the cover of Child of the 50s.
Absolutely. I still think, of course, now, rest in peace as paper, I still think it's one of the best satirical, certainly more than entry level, meaning for young people, true satire.
Your album or Mad Magazine?
Mad Magazine.
Because I think your magazine would qualify for that.
I don't have a magazine.
I mean, your record, your album. Now, I was.
You know what I'm curious about? I wrote things down to ask you.
Do you want some water, Robert?
I wouldn't mind.
Okay.
I'll calm down a little. Another thing is I parked way away thinking.
There's a bottle right here.
I don't drink. Oh, water.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then
Before you walked in, we were talking about Richard Nixon. We were just about to get there, but we can hold off. We can build up to that.
Well, you can finish your thoughts. I mean, even he took a hint, didn't he?
It was basically that, when I did these portraits, I wasn't like out to get anybody in particular, like to portray anybody, like make anybody look stupider or more horrible than somebody else, including a Richard Nixon. I wanted to be fair-minded when I did these portraits.
I think you missed some nuances of James Abram Garfield.
I knew somebody was going to bring that up.
The thing about him, and it's not exactly etched in his face in any photograph or your portraiture, is that he was shot by a man named Guiteau, and who was called a disappointed office seeker. And I used to get a calendar every year from the dry cleaner. And it had each president's birthday with a cogent fact about each. Thomas Jefferson, Purchase, Louisiana, George Washington, James Abram Garfield, shot by a disappointed office seeker. So I want to know more about it. So I looked up in the Encyclopedia Britannica under Garfield, James Abram. It says, see office seeker, disappointed. How are you? There's an old friend.
Can I ask you which dry cleaner we're talking about?
Believe me, the calendar was better than the dry cleaning, but I want to ask you something. I don't know anything about, the art world and all. I bought a house from Gene Thor. He was an art dealer. What is the difference between an artist or a painter and an illustrator?
Well, illustrator is like...
Is that a tender point?
It's lower on the rung. A cartoonist
Why?
Cartoonist is lower. Is lowest, I think. It's like kind of like the gay porn of the art world. It's like gay porn is the lowest ebb of show business that you could. So cartoonist is down there, and then illustrator is a notch below, and then you have fine artists, gallery artists, and stuff. And but I like to be associated with the lowest form normally. So I go back and forth between cartoonist and illustrator. But illustrators were basically guys or women and men who did their work. For they were assignments. So you did your work for money, and you did what you were told to do, for more or less, for magazines, newspapers, books,
Because that illustration of Nick in the inside cover captures him completely. It looks exactly like him. And everything about him, it's like a true portrait. Well, even if there are fewer lines or colors. It was originally not colored.
No liver spots in that drawing. I love Nick Meglin. We have Sam Viviano here, who was art director at MAD for many years.
Where's Sam?
Sam.
Hi, Sam.
He worked with Nick.
Fan.
He probably knew Nick better than. So Nick was a beautiful guy, and I had him as a teacher back when I went to School of Visual Arts in the 70s. And, he was he held court. He was like a comedian. He was so witty and funny and, also insightful about, the drawing. And he noticed what I was doing, but not quite until I actually started doing work for MAD. And I reminded him that he was my teacher. And so we kind of clicked and kept in touch. And, sadly he died last year, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. It was a worthy obituary. It shocked me to read it.
Yeah,
He
sad. It was
retired to North Carolina.
Out of the blue. Yeah, he was a beautiful guy, like I said, but he also was very encouraging me. He saw something in what I was doing, and he encouraged me to pursue what I wound up doing.
Well, I would like to know why I wasn't in Jewish comedians. More Jewish comedians. I had to wait till even more Jewish comedians.
I have a good...
And the photo itself, my lawyers are still working on.
That's right.
With
When we first met, the first thing you said to me was, "You'll hear from my lawyer in the morning." You are in the third book because when I did the first book, you weren't quite old enough. So I had to. When we had the gallery show at the Society of Illustrators, you came, and your drawing was downstairs. The Society of Illustrators is 2 floors. Yours was, and you were upset about that. You said, "Why am I downstairs?" I said, "Well, because in deference to the older comedians who are up on the first floor."
Only mockingly. I'm so admiring of what you do. But let me ask you something. When you did this president's book, I'll ask you later exactly why, but you wanted to do this. But how did you, in the days before photography, how did you choose which portraits, and how did you infuse Drew Friedman into, say, Washington, which is a very unique look at him. I've been reading a lot about him lately, and I've seen a lot of the portraiture.
Could we advance the images? Or you want me to do that? I'm going to take a shot. Okay.
Go back 16 places.
We just want to advance the images.
He looks very much at peace. I don't see the sorrow.
Well,
yeah, I like it very much. I don't see the sorrow.
The cover, you know, it was like wasn't that much of a, you know, it wasn't that much of a struggle to come up with, like, you know, putting. Sorry, I just want to move.
You don't have to stoop over. Everyone can see you.
Okay. So anyway, you know, putting Lincoln on the cover was kind of a no-brainer, for whatever reason. But Washington, you know, back when you know doing the research for these portraits, the earlier guys, there were paintings and there were etchings, and there obviously were no photographs, and there wasn't that much, and most of them were glamorized, you know, because they were commissioned portraits, so they were incredibly glamorous. I mean, he wasn't an unattractive man, but you know, he probably. You know, to my mind, somebody pointed out they think he looks like Stewie Stone, the comedian.
Well, your Stewie Stone is one of the most.
Thank you. Thank you.
He is not the most famous or greatest comedian of all time. I know Stewie, but the portrait is fantastic.
But had you thought of that before, that he looks a little like Stewie?
Yes.
Okay.
Honest to God, the nose is a little stereotypic, ethnic, shall we say?
Well, it was always my feeling about Washington. But like I said, the portraits of him.
My father would probably thought he was Jewish. George Washington, Jewish, believe me.
I would say he was Jewish.
No, he doesn't. Anybody that was, you know, like Crook, like Madoff, not Jewish. I found out, Episcopalian, you know.
Not Jewish. With that.
Sully Sullenberger landed that plane in the Hudson, Jewish. I know the family.
Did you know Ish Kabibble was not Jewish? The guy with the most Jewish name of all time.
He was on the radio.
He was not
right?
Jewish. Yeah, he was. Who was he with? Spike. No, earlier. Kay Kaiser. Ish Kabibble was not Jewish. Go figure.
Well, I heard. I watched a movie the other day. It was quite unbelievable. In 1929, with a very young Robert Montgomery. So this is college, and in it, Ukulele Ike does a Jewish accent that is right on the money. Cliff Edwards.
Yeah.
You know, so you know.
I'll have to look for that.
Talking about him, first of all, he is higher in my esteem than ever before, and I've been saying this for many years. He's not statue. The wooden teeth is all bullshit. That's all the machinations of Mason Locke Weems, Parson Weems, who wrote the book in 1804, The Life of Washington, who made up all this nonsense about never told a lie and
Cherry Tree.
Cherry Tree. He was flesh and blood. He risked, unlike modern politicians, you know, maybe McCain, who suffered, like Gandhi or Nelson Mandela. What other? This guy risked his life. He had the most beautiful farm in Virginia, the richest guy in Virginia. He took 20 years out for this doubtful thing, and he would have been hung by the British. And of course, we celebrate his birthday every year with a mattress sale. He was outstanding. He was very tall. He was a great dancer. I really think that's sort of like, not near the end, but within 10 years of his death, that thing, would you say, that portrait?
I guess so. Yeah.
He's not a young man in it.
No, I think, you know, I tried to draw these guys when they were president, including the current president. You know, it's like we'll get to that later. But my other comment about this, somebody pointed out that he might look like William Bendix, which I don't see. But
No, I recognize him as a very interesting, realistic interpretation of George Washington.
Okay. The other guy was like, who I've always thought he looks like is Larry Fine of the Three Stooges. You know, and you can see that. You can see
and
that.
Also, I have a big photo in my bedroom that I wake up to every day, among a few other comedians. But the trio from which you derived the beautiful Marx Brothers. The photo of the three of them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Beautiful.
So. Once again, I'm not sure how to advance.
I like FDR too, particularly.
No.
Did you have any problem
I'm
with, I
sorry.
mean, some of these guys, you know,
Like I said, like
they're really obscure.
there were. Just want to go to the one after Washington. Do you mind standing there and just doing it for the?
That's Adams.
What? Oh, that's a good. That's too intelligent.
These are young people. Young people are supposed to know how to do this.
So, like I said, there were like for the earlier presidents, there were obviously no photographs, and there wasn't that much reference. But you go to like later guys, and there's just so much to choose from as far as reference goes. And I remember when I was doing Jimmy Carter, it's just like you go to Getty Images, and there's thousands and thousands and thousands, and mostly he's smiling, which I didn't want to really do because it's it's what you would expect.
None of them smile, really.
I don't know. I screwed it all up. I just pressed the top.
First,
right
his
button.
host is late, then the machine doesn't work. This is a cursed
You
meeting.
guys have the book, so you can just refer to the book. Okay, well, now we're back at number 1. So we want to go to I got you. Okay, that's easy. Okay. So
This is an obscuro.
So this guy's Millard Fillmore. We don't want to give away too much, but you've already bought the book, so it's okay. But Millard I'll say this right off the bat.
Buffalo.
To me, he looks like Alec Baldwin, and that's been pointed out online. Drawing these guys, I was thinking, like, who does he look like? Who does he look like?
See that?
So if they ever make a film about the guy, I assume,
I just worked with him on Will and Grace.
Really.
He had he needed a hip operation. He was limping around. It was very funny. I told him that what he's doing on Saturday Night Live, he'd be in jail or killed if he did it in Russia or Egypt or China.
Had he thought of that before? Or? Like.
Well, he's gotten in enough trouble in America, so.
That's true. That's true. But he was.
Anyway, even though the quality of some of the sketches are not great, long live. This is a wonderful time for journalism, a very heroic time for journalism, and also for political satire, people speaking out and trying to get laughs on very serious subjects, like the disintegration of this democracy.
We'll get to all that, of course. We're leading up to that. This guy was once known as the worst president, of all time. So
They used to hold a burial for him in Buffalo every year, and it became smaller and smaller group.
Really?
Seriously, until 2 or 3 people around the grave.
Do they still have it? You think? Like.
I don't
at
know.
this
I've been
point?
out of Buffalo quite a while. I went to Alfred University. I graduated in 1962. That was about 80 miles from Buffalo. And there were high schools named after him, or maybe supermarkets. And he didn't raid a bridge.
There were, you go to the town where Andrew Johnson was born, and it's like they have the Andrew Johnson Diner there, and it's like everything is a tribute. And he's like one of the first president to be impeached, but he's beloved in that town. It's like
Of course, the
the facts haven't penetrated like the.
I have lost patience entirely with the Confederacy. It was always treason. Then, now,
So this
and
is
always.
speaking of Andrew Johnson. And again, so he followed Abe Lincoln. Obviously, he wasn't very popular. They impeached him. He got through. Like one vote got him through. He wasn't actually impeached, or he wasn't actually like.
He was impeached, not convicted.
Exactly. So he. But again, like drawing him, I did go into this project. I'm not like a political junkie, so I was like kind of discovering or learning about these guys as I was drawing them. I like going into these projects not knowing, like being an expert. I like to learn along the way, but but also like. Again, like, who does he look like? And I saw
The same nose as George Washington, I think. You switched faces.
I have a thing with those.
Well,
But,
they say he was a real drinker and all
yeah,
that.
and he was unpopular. He wasn't a pleasant man. And
He's an idiot, and he was,
Pretty much, yeah.
He was. Meanwhile, there was another unknown that people would say were idiots, who became a tremendous hero and the best of America, and that was Harry Truman, who was a nobody, a hack. And same thing with the guy who blew the whistle, the Surgeon General on AIDS. What was his name again? Coop. He was a Republican and all that, and he actually, and that has been true of several Supreme Court justices. So we have hope,
Well, a lot of people grow into the job, and then other people can't, it won't happen.
It's a tremendous tragedy about Lincoln. I don't even like jokes about it, It's not far enough away from me because I think American history would have been, well, when I see jokes about Kennedy, I mean, it's these
true.
young people making jokes about it.
It's too soon, right?
For me, and also Lincoln, American history would have changed. I think that we would not have had Jim Crow somehow, I think. It's hard to tell, but...
This guy I thought looked like Tommy Lee Jones,
He does, but you know what, Drew? That's the kind of thing that a rich guy like him would commission. That's really a beautiful. I mean, if you colored that in, the guy. I mean,
Again,
even the way it is, it looks. I'm sure he would be pleased with it, and it's a beautiful piece of work.
Again, he was incredibly, unpopular, and he was actually vice president for just 5 weeks, when Lincoln was assassinated, and then he became president.
Oh, right.
And then, and people loved Lincoln at that point, and then all of a sudden they were dealing with this guy, so they wanted him out of there. So, but I don't hold any grudges.
So why did you, with all the things you've done, including fantastic stuff in political journals? I mean, I'm not sure if I thought I see you from time to time in the New Republic.
Well, that's where you told me you first saw my work, and I did a regular thing for the New Republic back when Obama was president.
And when it was the New
and
Republic, too, I
did a lot of political work, and that's why I got Kurt Anderson to write the foreword, because I first worked with him at Spy magazine.
But also your comedy background, not to mention it runs in the genes of your very talented family. What made you do a thing about the president? Do one of each president?
It was like it was an experiment. I did Lincoln, mainly because somebody posted their portrait of Lincoln on Facebook, and I thought it was pretty good, and then I realized I've never drawn Lincoln. Let me do a portrait of Lincoln, which I did. I put it up, and it just organically went on from there. Like, let me do a couple more, and then so okay, I have a book, and then they were. The publisher was like, something different. So, I'm restless. I'm always looking for new kinds of.
You're an alive, living artist.
For the moment.
You could sneeze on a paper, put your name on it, make a fortune.
So we had talked about Harry Truman briefly. So here's my portrait of Harry Truman. It's like, now he's possible. Is he the biggest mass killer in the history of the world? Possibly.
No, I don't like that revisionism.
Okay, all right.
If I were a troop in Okinawa, it had gone on long enough.
I do agree.
It's a barbaric thing, but the firebombing of Tokyo, which what was his name? The SAC commander that. Marshall, you know who I'm talking? Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay, he was the first B-29 commander, and they're making these imperfect bombers in which troops are being killed because it went from drawing board to combat in 2 years, and they can't even do a 737 MAX made out of an older plane in 7 years, whatever. And so he discovered that they could go in because everything in Japan was made of wood. So the firebombing actually killed many more people. But what he was a hack from Missouri who had the courage of his conviction, who wasn't even let in on secrets. He didn't know about the atomic bomb. Roosevelt, he was a running mate, and he was a nobody. And I think that his tenure as president was incredibly heroic, even though he made mistakes. I remember when he was going overseas. There's a wonderful biography of him by who's the guy that did? I'm old. Names and Nouns. McCullough.
Yeah.
That beats all of them.
I think they sell it here in this store.
I'm sure they do. It was wonderful. Yes, he was on his way to World War I. He stops in New York. And a Hebe town, a lot of Jews. But Eleanor Roosevelt at a cotillion ball said, well, there were too many Jews, but, she was an 18-year-old kid. Nobody's perfect, you know what I mean? But
well, did they have a point at least? Like, it was.
Well, he also had a Jewish partner who was a haberdasher. And in
St. Louis?
In Missouri.
Yeah.
And he begged Harry, please recognize Israel,
Wow.
Anyway, I thought ending the war and just in general, he went from a hack to a hero, and I think that's a damn good portrait of him.
Well, I like to think of the presidents that were, I was alive during their tenure. Like, when I was born, Ike was the president in 1958. Was Truman the president when you were born?
No, I was born in 1942. Roosevelt was president.
Okay.
And he was an idol in my house.
Sure.
And I vaguely remember at 3 years old his death because my father was inconsolable. And my father would look at television, and because when I think now and I see these people, like the congressman from Staten Island has now approved an impeachment inquiry, and some guy said, I never sent nothing to no campaign candidate before, but we're gonna get him out of office. He's wrong for Staten Island. And and how can the guy say that? Well, Roosevelt won there were only 48 states. He won 47, didn't he? Or did he sweep all 48 and 36? And yet there were people that hated Roosevelt, and many tens of millions voted against him. My father would see Adolph Manju in a movie, goes, that anti-Roosevelt bastard. I think that's why he didn't like W.C. Fields, who I'm in touch with his granddaughter and his grandson. And
I think Adolph Manju outed communists and some of the committees in the 40s too.
Oh, he was
not a nice guy.
Yeah,
he was a good actor. He was a good actor, though.
So
speaking of being devastated by a death, it's like the first president I remember in my lifetime was this guy, and I was 5 when he was assassinated, and I only was aware of that because there was nothing on television for 4 days, but funeral coverage and assassination coverage. So I couldn't watch the Three Stooges, and I remember being very upset about that.
They are an acquired taste, and the Stooges. I see in it Jewish immigrant humor and rhythms.
It's a low comedy. I love the Marx Brothers
Plautus.
as much as I love the Three Stooges. So
I think the Marx Brothers are better than the Three Stooges.
Well, how about the Ritz Brothers? Are you okay with them? Harry Ritz.
I am friends with Harry's daughter.
Yeah, she's on Facebook. And
not on Facebook. I don't go on Facebook.
I'm friends with Shemp Howard's nieces on Facebook.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I know.
I'm unimpressed with people who are related.
I ran an evening one night. I was the MC, or as the head waiter at the Fieldston Hotel when the Borscht Belt used to say, MC, Moshe Kaka. Anyway, I ran a discussion during the New York Comedy Festival about 15 years ago on the Three Stooges, and they showed 10 really good clips. And I had Moe's daughter and son, who were Beverly Hills grandparents, beautifully dressed, beautifully educated at UCLA, talking about how Papa would come home from the studio and he loved family life. Jerome, Curly, who used to go to the big El Mogambo and everything, and pull the tablecloth out, and if the dishes broke, he'd put it on his check. And that's why he had 2 strokes at 38 or whatever. And Shemp was also what Rodney Dangerfield used to call a rounder, no roots really. And Larry Fine's kid sister, a 75-year-old woman,
Lila Budnick.
She was on stage with Moe's 2 daughters and Larry's sister, who unfortunately for her looks exactly like Larry.
That's right.
From the Three Stooges.
Right, it worked for Larry.
Genetic luck certainty. And
you could see it in their face.
But when Moe, with the 2 children, Moe's 2 and their grandparents now, and educated and all that, talking about him, it was all I could do to keep from smacking each one of them and putting my pinkies in their nostrils. I have the entire set, and I did a retrospective. I watched every single one this past year.
You're still not a Three Stooges fan, necessarily.
Of course I'm a Three Stooges fan.
Moe's son Paul, who I guess you met.
Ritz Brothers, to me, overwhelmed.
Yeah,
They tried too hard.
I have problems. I want to like.
Hello. Calm down.
I have problems with them too, but I want to like them more than I do.
They did big features, whereas the Stooges, Harry Cohn signed them to Columbia.
That's right.
$1,000 a week, and that's what what they got at the end of their career, too. And at the beginning, the very first one is a musical, in fact. They had big production values at Columbia Studios. And as their career goes along, you see the same hallway, the same, schlocks.
Well, the later ones with, Joe Besser, it's like the enemies are like kitchen appliances. They wouldn't even bring in villains or anything.
See,
it's like they're fighting against blenders and toasters and.
He was great on Abbott and Costello as Stinky.
Yeah, well, he was a great. I always say he was a great Stinky. But
Meanwhile, John Kennedy's assassination was. There's a segue for you. You know what? That shows him. He looks like his illness. Can you go back to? I don't want to ask it. Forget it. We'll get Zachary Taylor.
Well, I wanted to give Kennedy this is, I mean no respect to John F. Kennedy, but like an oh shit kind of expression, like I'm doomed, It's like not that he had any awareness of that.
He looks like he has steroids in him from
well, he certainly
illness.
He was pumped up with that, but just to like fill out his face, to help him get elected. But he's like obviously had no awareness that his life was going to be cut short. But he always kind of had, looking at photos of him now or portraits, he just has a kind of you get so sad looking at his face. You know what's going to happen. So I don't know. I somehow wanted to capture. I didn't want to have him smiling or
No, I agree. Apparently his World War II experience was the real deal. That he was in harm's way and was a hero.
Did you ever meet him or encounter him?
I did not.
He loved having comedians around him. If you look, I did a blog and there's photos of him and Milton Berle, Jerry Lewis, Nichols and May, Danny Kaye, Carol Burnett.
No, I am a friend of the families of Robert Kennedy Jr., although because my son worked for him for 8 years in the Waterkeeper Alliance. But Bobby's off the deep end a little, too, with this anti-vaccine stuff. But let's say that the family gave at the office. I mean, this family is so laden with tragedy, some of it heroic. Joe killed on a dangerous mission. He, wounded. A sister who was sick, many generations dying, one after another. It's tragic, and he does not look like Camelot there. He looks more like his life is in that face.
Yeah, I didn't want to not glamorize him or any of them, but
he was incredibly handsome.
There he is. But
That's Pinocchio. That's a guy who lies.
The only, this is just an observation, but the only hands that are in the book are with Nixon. I don't know what that means, but this is a little secret, and it's only for you guys here. It's like actually based this Nixon on one of the wax figures of him. From Madame Tussauds. That's true. It's like
Why?
The photograph that I used as reference just really jumped out at me. And actually, when I saw the photograph, I didn't know it was a wax figure. I said, "Wow, look at that!" And that's what I wanted to incorporate. It jumped out at me. So, but maybe there's more to it than that. But, it's like. And actually, the wax figure, he had a lot more hair. So I had to take out, because Nixon was really
He had that widow's peak.
Yeah. So it was thinning out, so I had to extract a lot of the hair.
He's looking very good these days.
Aside from him, it's like he's one of these. Everybody seemed to hate Richard Nixon when and then he was then he left office, and then everybody kind of missed him. It was no fun. I'm talking for caricaturists anyway, artists. They were like, you got Gerald Ford after Nixon, and all of a sudden, who was David Levine supposed to draw, or or those guys? It's like Nixon was like a gift from heaven.
I'll show you how forgiving Ford was. Not only did he forgive Nixon and pardon him.
Now, did you meet Ford?
Yes, I did. I did a television show with him. Mrs. Ford came backstage and they're playing our song when I was on Broadway. But then I did a special. I did the first special ever on HBO, and I did 9 of them. But this was not one of my own. It was called Humor in the Presidency. We did it in Grand Rapids, Michigan, his hometown. He, his wife, Mort Saul, Chevy Chase, who I believe single-handedly contributed to his loss at the polls with his falling all the time on Saturday Night Live. The man was an athlete at the University of Michigan, and they made him, this clumsy thing. He didn't mind him being there. And Pat, the guy who ran for president, was there. Paulson,
Ah.
and I'm leaving someone out. Oh, the guy in Buffalo who stands up and does parody.
Was Lucille Ball there too?
No. Mark Russell.
Was
who
Lucille
I
Ball
find
there?
medium funny. What?
Lucille Ball, was she there?
No, but
Okay.
I knew her through Lucy.
Did
who
you
I
know
was
Gary
on-
Morton at all?
I had dinner with them at their house.
I like talking about Jewish comedians more than
You know about him.
presidents.
They say the same thing about Milton Berle. But anyway,
No, I never knew that.
yes.
You know about
Why
Hunt-
do you think she stayed with him?
You know about Hunt's Hall, right? Same thing.
He was on my talk
The
show.
same affliction.
With Gabe Dell.
Yeah, I remember that. It's
I
on
had a
YouTube.
talk
It's on
show.
YouTube.
I had a talk show on USA Network. We were on 2 years, once a week. And we were doing so well that we were replaced by the real estate seminar, the Dave Del Dotto cash flow method, which shows you how the cash flows from your bank account directly to Dave's. You know what they said? Jimmy Cagney smacked one of them when he worked with him.
Really?
And they loved, Ronald Reagan was very kind.
Angels with dirty faces. Well, they were wise guys back then, but they weren't really comedians.
Physically smacked a
could see
teenage
that.
kid?
Well, which one did he smack? Because I
know.
wanted to smack a few. Like
I had the
Bernard Punsley.
I had the goofy one. Was that Leo Gossi?
Well, no, he wasn't goofy then. Hunt's Hall would have been goofy.
No, Hunt's Hall,
Bobby Jordan,
the one
maybe.
that wore the baseball cap.
Yeah, he was Hunt's. That was Hunt's.
He was on with Gabe Dell. And
That's on YouTube.
I also had Spanky McFarland on.
You were on Mike Douglas with Spanky McFarland.
Oh, that's what it was.
And Yoko.
Oh, my God.
Don't I know my stuff? Remember that one?
You know what? I'll tell you what, Mike
Spank-
Douglas, the great family man. Remember his talk show? Sweet. Yoko Ono was doing something I believe she called singing, but while she's performing, Mike Douglas, great family, turns to me. Look at that pair of tits on her.
Oh, wow. Jesus Christ.
I also had.
This is being recorded,
I had Darla. Oh my God. Well, the president said bullshit. I can say that. Darla Hood was on, and Spanky had done time for stock fraud.
Had he really? That's
Yes, he did. A lot of them didn't turn out well.
Harry, did
Alfalfa
you know
got
that?
killed in a bar.
Yeah, well, that was Scotty Beckett died young. Some of them died really young.
You know, some of those are good too. You like the Our Gang comedies?
Yeah, I love them. Yeah, I
Did
love
you ever
them.
draw them?
I've drawn a little bit over the years. Yeah, I adored those. I wanted to be.
Oh my God, what's that?
I wanted to spare you.
Oh,
Are you okay?
yes.
Take some water.
Kurt Anderson was
had to-
right. Scary.
I had to build up to that. But this is actually the last drawing I did for the book. You know, I wasn't sure how to approach him. And actually,
you didn't do them chronologically.
No, not at all. I jumped around, but I saved him for last because I just wasn't sure how I wanted to draw him, like making a face, draw him like really orange, you know, like orange hued. But and then when I was working on this book and people started to know I was working, they said, "Are you gonna include Trump?" And I said, "Well, yeah, he's the president." You know, even though like it was hard to say President Trump for the first year or so, you know, now it's like, you know.
You've drawn political figures that you didn't agree with.
Yeah, yeah. So, but still, it was just like I wasn't accepting, you know, that like a lot of people that he was actually the president. But you know, now I do. But anyway, I saved him till last, and I wanted to again be respectful, but also, you know, like try to capture something.
I have spent years trying to figure out his hair, and I think I finally found it. I wonder if he can do it himself. It may be simpler than it looks, but in good lighting, you can see a lot of pink. He doesn't have much hair in his head. And he is really grotesque, and he's incredibly overweight and bloated. And he does physical. I'd love someone to get up, just say, you know, you fat, ugly, stupid, but no one will, and because that's getting in the way he is, you know, that's doing what he does. Somebody has to get up and with proper oratory. You see, he's like bad stand-up. No one ever heard a politician speak like that before. It's not a mystery to me how he did the fandango with a lot of bankers and everything and screwed them up and all, and he did that in a very brilliant way. He is historically ignorant. He has absolutely no social conscience. He is a perfect narcissist personality disorder, and I think that's what that looks like. That looks like a person who can't ever be wrong. and a haughty kind of. He's also not in a street way, but he's stupid because he doesn't have any context.
Robert, don't hold back.
He doesn't have any context. He didn't understand the triad of government, I think, when he took office, except in what he could help, influence Congress people when he went to Congress to talk about real estate dealings and all that. But he is a showman, and I'm sorry, I think Adam Schiff is a very bright guy, and Swalwell and all these people, but I believe Robert Mueller looked disabled. He did not speak like a man he looked like a man on a mental decline, and I think he couldn't hear. Can't anyone talk up? The closest I've heard, I'm not supporting any one candidate yet, Kamala Harris. She could give it to you. She could give a good damn speech, and I suppose Elizabeth Warren as well. Start riling people up.
I vote for whoever I want to draw the most, and that's Bernie. Bernie, who once sat in the very chair you're sitting in when he did a talk here.
Yeah, he's in big trouble.
Yeah, I know.
Because
right?
he had a heart stent, put in. 2 of them, as a matter of fact. And
it's sad.
Are you raising your hand? What do you need?
I'm gonna go on to. We have one more image to show.
Oh, you have a new show coming in?
No, it's a. You know who this young man is.
Thank God my parents are in heaven and didn't see this. Yale Drama School. This is what happened. I think
this is my portrait of Robert for my 3rd old Jewish comedian book. That I was worried how you would take it. It's like. Most of the Jewish comedians embraced the drawings. Jerry Lewis was thrilled. He called me. Freddie Roman, Mickey Freeman from the Bilko Show.
He's on my answering machine, and he died 2 days later.
It's sad.
Preserved
Mickey called me so much I stopped taking his calls. Actually,
I know.
It became annoying. But
there's one great joke that he had. He had an old joke, and he said. He was Zimmerman on the Bilko Show.
A little blonde-haired guy on the Bilko Show.
He was a Borscht Belt comedian. He was married for 97 years.
Nat Hiken loved his face, and he couldn't really speak.
All their faces.
He couldn't really speak very well, but.
So he says, I was performing in this hospital ward, and this guy, and I'm, sick people, and I'm telling him good jokes, my best material, and he doesn't laugh. And I'm not getting any laughs. Finally, I gave up. I said, I hope you get better. He says, you too. They all were flattered. I'm flattered. You think you could have drawn anything to have Drew what's your name? Friedman. Also, I was an admirer of your father's work. I know you did a book with your brother. It totally runs through the family.
Speaking of my dad, he wrote a play called Steam Bath, and even back in the early 70s, I thought Robert Klein would be perfect as the lead in this play.
I may have.
I think you were in your early 30s. The character was about 40, so I think you were a little too young. But I always thought you had because you're also a good actor, a great actor.
Thank you.
Did you ever remember Robert and Alan and the Pussycat? That's the first time I ever saw you.
Well, that was my second movie. But I'll tell you a quick story.
A great
about
actor
that.
and a great comedian. So you just like
a very quick story in shorthand. You got to know. They have a guy coming in with a Trump book. I play George Siegel's buddy in that, and I'm a single guy, and I work in a bookstore. We use the bookstore on Fifth Avenue, which is defunct, of course. And they needed a girl who had no lines. I'm a single guy, and she's in bed with me. And Barbara Streisand and George Siegel come to my apartment. So this beautiful girl, she's a model from Connecticut. She's a senior in high school. Her name was Marilyn Briggs. And she's in bed with me all day. She has no lines. Gorgeous girl. She became Marilyn Chambers.
Wow.
And I remember her remark that day after a day of shooting. She said, "Oh, my father's going to kill me when he sees this." She was from Darien. I said, "Why? There's no nudity or anything." "He's very strict." Wah, wah, wah.
This is before she wound up on the ivory snow box.
I think they're trying to get rid of us here at the Strand.
Well, we're going to do a few questions.
Oh, great.
And then I'm going to sign books. But I just want to thank you again for doing
Again,
this with me.
I thought I left enough time. And
So if anybody has any questions for Robert or for me, that, go ahead.
Drew, hello. Are you at all concerned that the title of the book is too close to Woodward and Bernstein?
That was purposely we thought of that. It's like we left out the men part, but so it's close. It's close, but it's something different. So yeah, that was on purpose.
I don't think it'd be mistaken for their book. I mean,
Donald Trump has got to be the gift for comedians like nobody else. Unbelievable. Every day he says something comedians can't even make up stuff like this.
Well, he's like a comedy president. It's like
yeah, but you know what?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday a reporter started to talk to him and asked him a question. And he says, and then suddenly he looks at him and he says, "You talking to me?" I mean, this is right out of Robert De Niro.
You know what? I thought that it was funny early on. It's not so funny now. It's self-parodying. In other words, if you watch MSNBC, you see Nicole Wallace, who had to train Sarah Palin in real life, a reformed Republican who left the party. They laugh all the time around the table, but it becomes less and less funny. I think for the late night comedians and all that, I think in my audiences, I come about politics in a slightly different way, not the day-to-day, because I think a lot of people who voted for him, who would switch back, I don't know, it's sort of an intimidation. I think maybe some of them are unhappy or ashamed. So my answer is that it's not nearly as funny as it used to be. That's my feeling.
Getting tired?
It's getting dangerous because you can't be sure that this guy will leave if he doesn't get elected. What are you going to do? You're going to start having violence, or you're going to start having some sort of civil disobedience. This stuff is dangerous. This is like yelling fire in the theater at this point because there are morons out there. Somebody's going to get whacked soon, I think, because that's America, and that kind of talk doesn't help.
Both of you are obviously students of comedy and close observers. Both of you are obviously students of comedy and close observers of the presidency. Which presidents do you think used humor to best effect? They used humor to best effect.
Well, JFK, there are books about the wit of JFK. Actually, there's a book, The Wit and Wisdom of Richard Nixon, too. So, there were people who found him funny. But
Lincoln was supposed to be very funny. I suppose he had to be, like a concentration camp inmate. They had their own humor, too, and things are so dire. There's no one that had to face, except for Washington, had to face what he had to face.
Yeah, we got the president of the Ukraine was a comedian, so,
Yeah. Roosevelt liked to zip one off in his patrician way. It's a very good. I think Lincoln was probably, because the first five, Adams, Washington, Monroe, Madison, no way.
Yeah, maybe Teddy Roosevelt.
Obama,
Yeah.
But in a professorial, quiet way. No one was certainly Spike Jones.
They weren't really funny guys.
Whoopee cushion
to this day.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe they feel they have to be somber.
Well, did you read Nixon's autobiography?
No.
I mean, was it? It's like it's like
He had humble beginnings. He had humble beginnings.
Sure.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, speak loud.
Question for you, Drew. Did you, while you're compiling...
You look familiar. What's your name?
Adam, sure. Okay. I have nothing. I can't, Robert. I can't, please. Okay. Did you, as you were compiling and completing the book, did you draw any, what was like an example maybe of something that you put together about presidents, about the patterns
in our collections, etc.? Did you come up with any discoveries?
You know, it's basically counting liver spots. You know, like who had the most liver spots. It's like it was more about. It's with me. It's about the faces. You know, it's like look at the faces, and you know, and you'll get a sense of what I was thinking. You know, like I said, the book was kind of an experiment. I wanted to get it out of my system, and now I'm back. I want to work on. I want to draw Jewish comedians. That's basically my passion. You know, so I got this out of my system, and I want to get back to drawing. You know, I love drawing Georgie Jessel. There's nothing I like more than.
Right, but he became.
I don't know if this is the right answer to your question, but
I never understood his talent.
well, we did a panel, and I said, and we're going to wrap this up momentarily, but I said during the panel at the Jewish Center on 16th Street with Gilbert Gottfried and Alan Zweibel, I said at one point, I
was there.
Yeah, and you, and I said I like comedians who are not funny, and you gave me a look, like what kind of. And I said, like Georgie Jessel, and then you got a big smile on your face. But I love him because I've yet to hear him ever say anything funny. And I know people swear by him. It's
also, Ben Blue. You know, he's really
he's kind of funny and mad.
I didn't know he was Jewish until I saw your book.
Yeah, he's Jewish.
I'd like to trade him for an Episcopalian.
Bluestein.
You know, my heroes were Lenny Bruce and Jonathan Winters. Jonathan was, I'd like him to be Jewish. I had a correspondence with him at the end of his life. He has a gorgeous face to draw.
Well, there's a famous story of Groucho Marx and George Burns watching TV, and Bill Cosby was performing. And Groucho said to George Burns, I wish he was Jewish. And it's like, now it's like, maybe it's so good he wasn't Jewish.
I had a little correspondence.
We have to
with
deal
Groucho.
with Harvey Weinstein, so
Don't talk to me about it. The Weinstein Company produced a documentary about me that's beautiful, that was on Stars for a year and a half, and now it's probably going to be in litigation. And the director
I
is
Can't
in the
Stop
back
My
there.
Leg.
It's called Robert Klein Still Can't Stop His Leg. Did I send it to you by email?
No, you haven't. I'm still waiting. And
we have a way of emailing it. Marshall Fine, who directed it, came down with me from Westchester tonight, and I did also a movie with Pacino for him. I knew he was a louse. I didn't know about the sex
Weinstein,
part.
yeah.
But Groucho, my first Tonight Show host, I hosted it about 15 times for Johnny, guest hosted. He wrote me a letter. He said, you were so funny. I never met him. Later, I met him the night with Marvin Hamlish playing for him at Carnegie Hall. But he said, you were so funny. I laughed so hard, I almost fell off my secretary's knee. Next time you come out to California, give me a call. He said, I'll buy you dinner. And if I really like you, I'll give you breakfast, too, he said. And sure enough, I was shooting Love American Style. I remember. And
who was your co-star in that? Who was your love interest?
A beautiful freckle-faced woman that was in a John Wayne
Patty
picture.
Deutsch?
No. She was in Westerns. She was gorgeous. I forgot her name.
Anybody know?
And Howard Da Silva, who became my dear friend. He was a blacklisted
Speaking
hero.
of blacklist, yeah, he was
a wonderful guy.
He played Ben Franklin in 1776.
He did. And the bartender in Lost Weekend, all that. So anyway, I went out and I said, called Groucho, and he, I said, Groucho, it's Robert Klein. I remember. Whenever
Did Erin Fleming pick up the phone?
No, she wasn't there.
She was busy smacking him around.
She gave 7 years more life to him, believe me.
I know. I knew her actually. I don't want to interrupt, but we talked about this before. But one of the perks of being the son of Bruce J. Friedman is you got to spend the entire day at Groucho Marx's house in 1975, which I did, which is a great
on the hill
memory.
there?
Yeah, in the Hollywood
He
Hills.
was a little run down by this time, but he had so anyway, I called him and he says, can you come to dinner? I said, well, Groucho was shooting at night. I was at Paramount. Everything was at night. He said, well, can you come to dinner? I said, well, Groucho was shooting at night. He goes, well, can you come to dinner? So I don't know if he's putting me on or he's a little mini strokes. So I said, you said you'd give me breakfast. He says, come for breakfast. So I came for breakfast the next morning. Erin was in New York on Groucho T-shirt business. And he told me there's his honorary Oscar and there's a picture of Erin. And he says, You know which one? He was in his pajamas. He had a hospital bed, but he was walking, running around, and he had a gorgeous medical attendant, a nurse, not in uniform, but he said, you know, if I had to give up one of these, which one I'd give up? And he pointed to the Oscar. And she surprised him about an hour and a half, 2 hours after I was there. She came back early, and his face lit up. And she was sued later by his son, unfairly. She won the case. She did not steal anything. She really was, you know, his companion. But he was, to regulars in Hollywood, I was thrilled because I love him, and he's an autodidact. He was a very brilliant man in his way. But he was a pain in the ass to women. And he would pinch them.
I remember that face when he was gazing at Erin Fleming. When we spent the day at the house, he would just like he would just light up when
Yeah,
she.
he was.
And he sang all his old songs, and she would do the Margaret Dumont part, and it was just an amazing. But unfortunately,
Made him happy.
We didn't take any photographs, which I'm.
But he was grouchy,
One
and
regret.
he was, not, had 3 marriages. He was probably tough to live with. Harpo was an angel, and and I finally heard Harpo speak.
Yeah,
on
there's
YouTube.
there is a clip. Yeah,
on YouTube.
He sounds just like the guy in Dead of Night who plays the nightclub owner. He has the exact same voice
That's
as
a
that
lot like
guy.
Groucho.
The bald guy sounds just like Harpo.
Yeah, he was an angel, and
Did you know you didn't you
Never
wouldn't have
met
known?
Harpo.
Yeah, Harpo died in '64.
here's something I said to Groucho: what's a definitive book about the Marx Brothers? And I said, Harpo speaks. He said, Harpo didn't write that, you know. He was proud that he wrote his own books, which, by the way, is also something that bothers me. You know, I saw Tony Schwartz at a party. I said, "You brought this on the world." He really wrote The Art of the Deal. He said, "I am the only author that discourages people from reading my book."
With that, I guess we should wrap it up.